I spent my entire life designing steel structures to withstand the heaviest storms, yet I never once noticed the silent rot slowly collapsing the very foundation of my own home.
Sign this power of attorney and drink up, or Dorian here will help you slip down those glass stairs tonight. Meredith sneers through her teeth, her fingers crushing my jaw as she forces that dark red pomegranate juice laced with thallium down my throat. Behind her, my CFO Dorian Croft casually grinds my hearing aid into the hardwood floor of my Malibu villa under his heavy leather boot heel. That numbing pain, the silent calling card of 6 months of slow poisoning, is crawling from my toes straight to my chest. But the real agony is the sheer humiliation of it. Realizing the wife of 10 years sharing my bed is just a cold-blooded predator, trying to bury me to cash in on my $42 million architectural empire. Now, completely deaf, locked in my own study with a lethal dose of metal pressed against my lips. How the hell do I keep myself breathing? Smash that subscribe button right now and drop a comment. What is your absolute play when the person who promised to love you has a knife at your throat? The Pacific was a flat sheet of gunmetal grey under the Malibu twilight. Because my glass villa sat on the bluff's edge, the tide below usually shook the floors. But after a collapsed scaffold at my downtown site, my world was reduced to a suffocating vacuum. I stood on the balcony, feeling the ocean breeze chill my face. Under my silver hair behind my left ear was a tender incision. Zurich was my cover story. In reality, I was in a private clinic, having a cochlear implant fitted into my skull. I touched the hidden switch behind my ear. Click. A sharp hiss surged through my brain, followed by an electric pop. And then, the raw sounds of the world rushed back. The raw crash of the surf below, the high-pitched whistle of the wind, the low hum of the climate control. Because I hadn't heard these sounds in 36 months, the volume made me gasp, my knees buckling slightly. "Calm down, Lucian," I whispered to myself, my voice sounding strange and metallic. "Steady. Don't look around." Because I had to keep this a secret, I forced my face back into the blank mask of a deaf man. Behind me, the sliding glass door glided open. I heard the sharp click of Meredith's heels, followed by the dragging footsteps of Dorian Croft, my CFO. "Lucian?" Meredith's voice cut through the air, far more abrasive than the soft tone I remembered. "Lucian? Are you out there?" I didn't turn. Because I was supposed to be deaf, I waited until she tapped my shoulder. "Oh, there you are, honey," Meredith said, her face instantly shifting into a warm, exaggerated smile. Her lips moved with theatrical slowness, matching the sign language she lazily traced. "Welcome home. How was Zurich?" "Cold," I said, speaking slowly, mimicking the flat pitch of a deaf man. "Very, very cold. The foundations on the lake, they are solid. Is that all you have to say?" Meredith signed, her lips twisted in a pout. "You've been gone for 3 weeks, Lucian. No, I missed you. No, you look beautiful." "I missed the house," I replied, keeping my eyes fixed on her mouth. "The silence is different there." "I'm sure it is," she signed, her eyes scanning my face with a cold intensity that made my stomach turn. She turned toward the study, waving her hand. "Come inside. Dorian is here. We have the commercial drafts for the West Coast project." I nodded, walking slowly to play the part of a degenerating 62-year-old. Dorian Croft was waiting by my drafting table, scotch in hand. Because he was my CFO and oldest friend, seeing him stand near my wife made a sick ache bloom in my chest. "Lucian, good to have you back," Dorian said out loud, his voice booming with warmth. He held up a thick blueprint roll, pointing to the title block with a thick finger. "We need to go over the structural load margins for the Santa Monica complex. I'll walk you through the numbers." "The columns," I said, touching the edge of the mahogany desk. "Are they 12-inch steel?" "They're 16 Lucian," Dorian said, tracing his finger along the blue lines. "Because the county inspectors are pushing for higher seismic thresholds, we had to beef up the reinforcement." "Good," I muttered. "We must be safe." "Of course," Dorian said, unrolling another sheet. He leaned over the table, But because he believed I was completely locked in my silent world, he didn't keep his voice down as he glanced at Meredith. "Did you mix the grey powder into his chamomile tea tonight? Don't let him suspect the bitterness." My heart did a slow, violent roll. Because I was an architect, my face remained solid, but inside, the structural integrity of my entire life was collapsing. "I already prepped the cup," Meredith replied in the same quiet, offhand tone, her heels clicking as she walked to the wet bar. "He's too tired to notice. The thallium acetate is completely odorless anyway. The chamomile's floral notes cover whatever trace of metal is left." "Are you sure about the dosage?" Dorian whispered, his voice vibrating clearly through my implant. "Because his son, Leo, is coming down from Stanford this weekend. If the boy sees him stumbling, he might start asking questions." "Leo is a kid," Meredith sneered, her voice dripping with ice. "Because he's so obsessed with his engineering classes, he won't notice a thing. He thinks his dad is just getting old. We just need to keep Lucien on the regimen for another 10 days. The accumulation is what matters." "How much has he taken so far?" Dorian asked, leaning back against the drafting table, swirling his ice cubes. "Enough to make his hands shake?" Meredith murmured, her back to me as she adjusted the kettle. "Because he thinks it's just a lingering effect of his scaffold accident, he hasn't even complained. I told him it was his daily heart supplement. He swallows whatever I put in his mouth." "He's a fool," Dorian muttered, "but we have to be careful. The auditors are flagging the escrow variances next week. We need him out of the picture before they trace those offshore wire transfers. Is the notary lined up for the gala?" "Yes," Meredith said, her voice smooth, almost melodic, as she poured hot water from the kettle. "Arthur is handled. Because we have the power of attorney drafted under the guise of a corporate health proxy. The moment Lucien signs it at the anniversary gala, you can clear the escrow accounts. The underwriters won't question a signature from his own wife when he's this incapacitated." "And the insurance policy?" Dorian asked, taking a slow sip of his scotch. "Is that active?" "3 million," Meredith murmured, her back still to me. "The double indemnity clause covers accidental falls. Once the thallium causes his peripheral nerves to fail, a tumble down those floating glass stairs of his will look like a tragic, predictable accident. The coroner won't even run a heavy metal panel on a 62-year-old deaf man with a history of vertigo." "What about his legal defense?" Dorian muttered. "What if his old friend Rhea Eldridge starts poking around? She's a toxicologist at the county lab. Lucien always talked about how smart she is." "Rhea lives in LA, Meredith dismissed him. "Because she's so wrapped up in her own cases, she hasn't seen Lucien in a year. By the time she hears about his accident, he'll already be cremated. There won't be any tissues left to test." "You've thought of everything," Dorian said, a low, appreciative chuckle escaping his chest. "I have to," Meredith said, "because I didn't spend 10 years playing nursemaid to a deaf man just to walk away with a minor settlement. I want the firm, Dorian. I want the Malibu house. I want everything he built." "We both do," Dorian whispered. "Just make sure he drinks every drop. We can't afford any delays." Meredith turned around, holding a delicate teacup. The sweet scent of chamomile drifted across the room as she walked toward me with a gentle, swaying grace. "Here you go, sweetheart," she said, her lips moving in that slow, mocking pantomime as she signed with her left hand. "Drink. It will help you sleep. You look so tired, so frail." I looked down at the cup. The liquid inside was a pale gold, but because I now knew the truth, it looked like a pool of liquid lead. My hand hovered over the porcelain handle, my fingers trembling slightly. "Thank you, Meredith," I said, my voice flat, my eyes locking onto hers. I stood in a terrible, frozen silence. To survive, I had to let them think they were winning, even if it meant taking the first step into their trap. "Drink it while it's hot, Lucien," Dorian said out loud, his face a mask of friendly concern. "You've earned a good rest. Zurich must have been exhausting." "Yes," I mumbled, raising the cup toward my face. Exhausting. Is something wrong, honey? Meredith signed, her eyes widening with a flicker of sudden, sharp suspicion. Why are you just staring at it? I was thinking, I said, my hand shaking on the cup, about the columns. Don't worry about the columns, Lucian, Dorian said out loud, stepping closer, his shadow falling across the desk. We've got everything under control. Just drink your tea. I lifted the cup to my lips. Under their watchful, predatory eyes, I felt the warm rim touch my skin, staring into the mouth of my own grave. The tea was steaming on my mahogany table, a pale gold liquid with the deceptive scent of chamomile. Because my hand was trembling from the raw shock of what I had heard, the delicate porcelain rattled against my fingernails like dry bones. Careful, honey, Meredith said, her voice rich with mock tenderness. She signed slowly, her fist tilted in saintly worry. You're shaking more today, Lucian. Is the numbness getting worse? It's just the cold, I said, speaking with the flat, unmodulated tone of a deaf man. The Zurich air, it gets into my joints. Well, you're home now, Dorian Croft said, stepping closer and patting my arm. And because we've got the Santa Monica contracts nearly finalized, you don't have to worry about a thing. We'll handle the heavy lifting. You just focus on resting, Lucian. The columns, I muttered, pointing a shaky finger at the blue lines. Are they 16-inch steel? They're 16, Lucian, Dorian said. Because the county inspectors are pushing for higher seismic thresholds, we had to beef up the reinforcement. You designed it perfectly, as always. But we've got it from here. Good, I said. We must be safe. Of course, sweetheart, Meredith said, her heels clicking on the hardwood. She signed slowly. Go rest, sweetheart. I'll bring you a fresh cup of chamomile upstairs. No, I signed back, shaking my head. No more tea. It makes my stomach burn. I just want to sleep. Oh, come on, honey, she said out loud, her lips twisting into a pout, leaning over my shoulder. Because she believed I was completely locked in my silent world, she whispered to Dorian. Did you mix the grey powder into his tea tonight? Don't tell me you forgot. I prepped the cup, Dorian whispered, his voice vibrating clearly through my implant. But because he's acting so damn sluggish, I don't think he even wants it. Is the thallium acetate starting to affect his stomach? It's just the accumulation, Meredith murmured. Because thallium mimics potassium, it's bound to cause some gastric irritation. He's too tired to notice. Just tell him it's his daily heart supplement. He swallows whatever I put in his mouth anyway. He's a fool, Dorian muttered, but we must be careful. The auditors are flagging escrow variances next week. We need him out before they trace those wires. Is the notary ready? Yes, Meredith said. Arthur is handled. Because we have the power of attorney drafted as a health proxy. You can clear the escrow accounts once Lucian signs. They won't question a signature from his own wife when he's this incapacitated. And the insurance policy? Dorian asked. 3 million, Meredith murmured. The double indemnity covers falls. Once thallium destroys his nerves, a tumble down those glass stairs will look like an accident. They won't run toxic panels on an old man with vertigo. What about his legal defense? Dorian muttered. What if his old friend, Rhea Eldridge, starts poking around? She's a toxicologist. Lucian always talked about how smart she is. Rhea lives in L.A., Meredith dismissed him. Because she's wrapped up in her cases, she hasn't seen Lucian in a year. By the time she hears about his accident, he'll be cremated. There won't be any tissues left to test. You've thought of everything, Dorian said, a low, appreciative chuckle escaping his chest. Because I had to get rid of the poison without raising suspicions, I let my hand spasm. I jerked my arm back, knocking the cup against the edge of my table. The amber liquid splashed across the polished mahogany, dripping down onto the expensive wool rug. Oh, for God's sake, Lucian! Meredith snapped, her polished facade cracking as she pulled her sleeve back. You've ruined the rug. I'm sorry, I stammered, raising my hands in mock confusion. My fingers, they didn't grip. They felt like wood. It's fine, Dorian said, though his jaw was tight as he dabbing at the desk. Accidents happen. Go up to bed, Lucian. Because my left knee was stiff, I limped up the stairs. Locking my study door, I sank against it. They are killing me, I thought. My wife and my best friend, poisoning me. Because I had to identify the toxin, I waited until 2:00 a.m. In the bathroom under my phone's blue light, my skin looked yellow. On my fingernails were white bands. Me's lines because I needed hard evidence. I clipped 3 nails and gathered 5 hair strands into a plastic zip bag. One piece of the puzzle, I whispered, tucking it into my leather jacket. Because I couldn't trust anyone, I hired a private investigator the next morning while Meredith was out. "You're sure these are completely invisible on the network, Arthur?" I asked, speaking in a low, urgent voice. Arthur adjusted his glasses as he mounted a tiny lens inside the smoke detector. "They run on an independent cellular band, Mr. Finch," he whispered. "Because they don't touch your Wi-Fi, there's no footprint. I've placed one here, one in the kitchen, and one in the study." "And the feed?" I asked. "It's streaming to my office," Arthur said. "If they whisper a confession, we'll have them in 4K. Be careful, because if they notice these, they'll know you're onto them. A cornered predator is the most dangerous kind." "I know," I said, my voice cold. "I know exactly what they are capable of." 2 days later, my phone buzzed with an encrypted message from an unknown number. "Lucian, I ran the mass spectrometry on the samples you sent. We need to talk now. Come to my lab. Use the back entrance because I couldn't risk my vehicle's GPS being tracked. I took a taxi to East LA. Rhea was waiting in her lab." "Lucian," she said, "you should be dead. Your hair and nails are saturated with thallium. Because the concentration is 40 times the lethal limit, your kidneys are shutting down." "And the Me's lines?" I asked, pointing to my nails. "They match the timeline perfectly," Rhea said. "Because the bands are spaced 2 millimeters apart, it proves you've been poisoned for 6 months." "Who is doing this?" "Meredith," I said. "And Dorian." Rhea gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Your wife? And Dorian? Why?" "Because they want the firm," I said. "And my $3 million double indemnity insurance. If I die of an accidental fall, the payout is guaranteed." "You need to go to the police, Lucian," Rhea urged, grabbing her phone. "I can write the official toxicology report right now. We can have them arrested by tonight." "No," I said, stopping her hand. "Because they have lawyers, a simple report won't be enough. They'll claim I was taking supplements or poisoned myself. I need the financial paper trail. I need to prove intent." "But you are dying, Lucian," Rhea raised her voice, her eyes wide with terror. "Every dose of that tea is destroying your nervous system. You can't keep swallowing it." "I'm not," I said. "Because I've been dumping it. But I have to keep up the act until the anniversary gala next week. If I stop showing symptoms, they'll change their plan. They might do something desperate." "It's a suicide run, Lucian," she whispered. "No," I said, looking at the graph. "It's an architectural structure, because if you remove the main supporting column of their plan, the whole thing will bury them." Driving back to Malibu, cold sweat broke out across my forehead. My toes felt like hot needles. The poison was still in my system, a silent clock ticking down. The villa was dark. I walked to my study, my cane clicking. Because my head was spinning, I didn't notice the draft from the hallway. I pushed open my study door and froze. My desk drawers were pulled open. The blueprints were scattered across the floor, and standing in the corner, holding my leather jacket, was Meredith. She turned slowly, her face shadowed in the dim moonlight. "Lucian," she said, her voice dropping all its warmth, replaced by a sharp, cutting edge. "What's in this pocket?" She pulled the small zip bag containing the leftover clippings and my hair samples from the inner lining. Her eyes locked onto mine, cold and unblinking. "Why are you saving your own hair, honey?" she whispered, stepping closer. "Are you keeping secrets from me?" The sea breeze outside had died down, leaving a heavy humidity. Because Meredith was standing over my leather jacket with my hair samples, the room felt like a vault. My heart hammered, but because I had spent decades detailing structural load points, I kept my hands dead still. I had to look dumb, a man whose brain was rotting from their poison. My jacket? I spoke slowly, dragging the vowels, keeping my eyes fixed on her collarbone. Meredith, did you find my sketches? The ones for the patio? Meredith didn't flinch. Because she was a seasoned predator, she simply let her lips curve into that sweet, poisonous smile. She signed with her left hand, while her right hand held the plastic zip bag tight. You've been shedding so much lately, Lucian, she signed, her voice dropping to a gentle whisper. I was just cleaning out your pockets, because I worry about your health, honey. Why are you hoarding your own hair, Lucian? Is there something you aren't telling me? The hair, I mumbled, swaying my head slightly as if vertigo had just gripped me. I wanted to show the doctor, because the scalp, it burns. Like fire, Meredith. Every night, it burns. Oh, sweetheart, she said, her voice dripping with artificial syrup. The doctor already knows. He says it's just nerve damage from your accident. But because you're so stubborn, you keep hoarding these things. You're getting so paranoid, Lucian. It's sad, really. You need to trust me more. The sliding glass door glided open. Dorian Croft stepped in, his leather shoes silent. But because my cochlear implant was set to maximum sensitivity, I heard the rustle of his silk tie. Is there a problem, Meredith? Dorian asked. What's going on? Why is he looking at you like that? No problem, Dorian, Meredith said, her eyes drilling into mine. Lucian was just explaining his collections because he's so confused. He forgot he's supposed to sign the joint venture proxies tonight. He's acting a bit difficult. Ah, the proxies, Dorian said, walking over to the desk, blocking the only exit. Because we have the Santa Monica zoning meeting tomorrow morning, we need those signatures verified before the bank closes. Let's get it done, Lucian. Sign the papers so we can all go to sleep. Do it now. I am so tired, I signed back, my hands trembling. My fingers, they don't hold the pen. Can we, tomorrow? Please, Dorian, tomorrow. No, we can't do it tomorrow, Lucian, Dorian said out loud, his voice dropping its friendly executive tone. He stepped into my personal space. Because he believed I was completely deaf, he leaned over and spoke directly to Meredith. He's stalling. He knows something. Why the hell is he saving his hair? Explain that to me, Meredith. It makes no damn sense. He doesn't know anything, Meredith whispered back, her voice a sharp buzz in my ear. Because the thallium has already destroyed his cognitive focus. He's just acting on senile instinct. But we can't take any chances. Get the door. Lock it. All right, Dorian muttered. I'll secure the room. We don't need any interruptions. No one gets in or out. What are you doing? I asked, letting my eyes widen. The door? Why is it locked, Dorian? Is there someone outside? Meredith? Just keeping the draft out, honey, Meredith signed, though she didn't make her lips match the words anymore. She walked to the wet bar. She picked up a crystal glass filled with a deep, dark red liquid. Because you're so dehydrated, I brought you some pomegranate juice. It's rich in potassium. It will help with the numbness in your toes. Drink it, Lucian. Drink it all. No juice, I spoke, my voice cracking. My stomach, it's like acid. I want water. Just water. Please, Meredith, just water. No more juice. You'll drink what I give you, Lucian, Meredith whispered out loud, her face completely blank. She walked back to the desk, holding the glass out. Because if you don't, we'll have to help you. And you know how much you hate being handled. Don't make us force you. Meredith, I whimpered, shrinking back. Please, I can't. Why are you doing this? Why are you locking the door? He's definitely onto us, Dorian whispered to her, his hand sliding inside his jacket pocket. Because if he was just senile, he wouldn't be resisting the juice. He's been dumping the tea, Vivian. I told you he wasn't that stupid. We should have used more from the start. It doesn't matter if he knows, Meredith whispered back, her eyes turning into black stones. Because he can't prove a damn thing. The cameras are offline, and his son is 500 miles away. We end this tonight. Give me the pen, Dorian. We are signing these right now. Here, Dorian said, handing her a gold fountain pen. Let's make him sign first. Grip his hand if you have to. Sign the paper, Lucian, Meredith commanded, slamming the document in front of me. Sign the health proxy now. No more games. No, I whispered. I won't sign. I don't know what that paper is. I need my lawyer. Call Arthur. Your lawyer is asleep, Lucian, Dorian sneered, his voice loud. And because you're in no condition to make decisions, your loving wife is taking over. Sign it. I won't, I gasped. I won't sign. Hold him, Dorian, Meredith hissed. Because we don't have all night. Grab his arms. Pin him down. Got him, Dorian growled, lunging forward and pinning my shoulders. Stop squirming, old man. You're only making this harder. Just sign and go to sleep. Dorian, stop! I screamed, struggling against his grip. But because the thallium had truly weakened my muscles over the last 6 months, I couldn't break free. My bad knee buckled, sending an agonizing jolt up my spine. You're killing me. Let me go. Meredith, help me. You're doing this to yourself, Lucian, Meredith said, her face inches from mine. Just sign the paper, and this will all be over. Sign it and drink the juice. I won't sign, I gasped, twisting my neck. You're trying to steal my company. You're trying to steal everything. I know what you did. We're not stealing anything, Lucian. Dorian laughed, a cold, dry bark. Because after you're gone, it's ours anyway. Now stop fighting. Just let it happen. Because they were so consumed by their own greed, they didn't see the tiny red LED blinking inside the smoke detector directly above them. They didn't know that my old friend Ria and the FBI were watching every single frame of this horror show in a black surveillance van parked down the Pacific Coast Highway. You don't have a choice, old man, Dorian growled, his breath hot against my cheek. He reached down, grabbed my left ear, and felt the small plastic receiver of my cochlear implant under my hair. What the hell is this? What is this wire? Meredith. Look at his ear. No, don't touch that. Keep your hands off me, I screamed, but it was too late. With a brutal jerk, he ripped the processor off my skull. The thin wire tore through my skin, and an agonizing flash of white noise exploded inside my brain. The world went dead, absolutely silent. The surf, the wind, their voices, everything vanished into a cold, terrifying vacuum. Dorian threw the expensive medical processor onto the floor, raising his heavy leather boot. Crunch. The plastic shattered into 100 useless pieces under his heel. He looked down at me, his face twisted in a smug, victorious grin. Because he had destroyed my hearing, he believed he had cut my last connection to the living world. Meredith stepped in close, her fingers clutching my jaw so hard I felt my teeth grind together. She pressed the rim of the glass against my bottom lip, tilting the dark red pomegranate juice forward. Drink it, Lucian. Her mouth formed the words, her eyes wild with a manic, murderous hunger. Drink it and go to sleep. It's over. The cold, metallic taste of thallium acetate touched my tongue. My chest locked. I was completely deaf, pinned by my oldest friend, with my wife pouring poison down my throat. And the FBI was still 3 minutes too far away. The red pomegranate juice splashed cold against my lips. Because my cochlear implant lay in shattered ruins under Dorian's boot, the world became a tomb of absolute silence. I couldn't hear my own breathing, nor the smug laughter on my wife's face. But because I was an architect, I knew every physical structure had a point of failure, a single load-bearing joint that would bring the ceiling down if struck. Dorian pressed close, eyes wild with greed. Because he believed I was helpless in my silent dark, his grip was loose on his left side. I didn't struggle blindly. Instead, I braced my good leg and slammed my boot heel onto his foot. Dorian's mouth flew open in a silent howl. Because the pain shattered his concentration, his grip vanished. In that split second, I lunged forward, throwing my weight into Meredith's chest. The glass flew, splashing a dark red stain across my blueprints. Meredith stumbled back. Dorian clutched his foot, his face crimson. I stood up straight, towering over my desk. because the silence in my head was total. My own voice sounded like a hollow vibration, but I spoke with the absolute authority of an architect. "Clean up the mess, Meredith," I said, my voice dead calm. Meredith's jaw dropped. Because she couldn't understand how a deaf man was speaking so clearly, her hands shook as she raised them to sign. "Don't bother," I said, my voice cutting through her gesture. "Because I don't need your theatrical hand-waving anymore, Meredith. I can't hear you, thanks to Dorian's boot, but I heard every word you two whispered over the last 3 weeks." Dorian froze, his hand still holding his injured foot. Meredith's lips parted, her mouth forming silent words that I read with ease. You can hear?" "I had a cochlear implant fitted in Zurich, Vivian," I said, using the name she thought she had buried 15 years ago in Nevada. "Yes, Vivian Blackwood, because I didn't get senile, Vivian. I got smart. I wanted to see if the woman I gave my life to was truly a black widow. And you didn't disappoint. You and Dorian were so incredibly arrogant, standing right in front of my face, scheduling my funeral like a business meeting." Dorian lunged toward me, his face snarling. "You old bastard! You played us! You think you can walk out of here alive?" "I'm not walking anywhere, Dorian," I said, raising my heavy cane, planting the steel tip firmly against his throat. "Because if you take one more step, I will collapse your windpipe. You aren't dealing with a frail invalid anymore. You're dealing with the owner of this house." Dorian stayed frozen, his eyes darting to the door. "The door is locked, remember?" I reminded him, a cold smile touching my lips. "Because you locked it yourself, Dorian. You said you wanted privacy. Well, now you have it. How does it feel to be trapped in the room you built for my execution?" Meredith's mouth moved rapidly, her eyes darting to the desk. "You haven't signed the health proxy. You can't prove a thing. It's just your word against ours." "No, I haven't," I said. "And because I didn't sign it, your little paper trail is dead. But that's not your biggest problem tonight, Vivian. What did you do, Lucian?" Meredith's mouth formed the panicked words. "What did you do with the files?" I reached slowly for my left wrist, undoing the heavy platinum cufflink, showing them the microscopic microphone grill. "Because you two love to whisper your crimes," I said, "I decided to share them. Every word you said about thallium, every mention of my $3 million policy, and every detail of your offshore accounts. It's all been streaming. Not to my Wi-Fi, Dorian, because you would have flagged that. It's on a private cellular band, streaming directly to a federal surveillance van parked on the highway." Dorian's chest heaved, his mouth moved. "That's a lie! That's a bluff! The network, I monitored every single gigabyte of data leaving this house." "You checked my home router, Dorian," I replied, speaking with cold precision. "But because my transmitter doesn't use the home network, you were completely blind. Your arrogance made you sloppy. You forgot that I designed this entire building. I know where every conduit runs, and I know exactly how to bypass your little security filters. You set us up from the start." Dorian's mouth formed the words, his face pale with a sudden cold panic. Rhea helped you." "Yes, she did," I said, "because she ran the mass spectrometry on my hair and nails. The results are already logged on the federal server. 40 times the lethal limit of thallium acetate, Dorian. It's an open and shut case of slow method attempted murder." Meredith suddenly lunged toward the table, her fingers clawing at the blue folder. "It's a lie. The assets are already ours. We signed the corporate transfer deeds. The notary verified them last night." "He verified a dummy ledger, Vivian," I said. "Because the moment my investigator flagged your Nevada records, I contacted my attorneys. We didn't just write a new will. We established an irrevocable split-interest trust. I pulled a crisp, blue-bound document from my inner coat pocket, throwing it onto the desk. Finch Architecture, this villa, and every cent of my $42 million portfolio are no longer mine," I said, "because they belong entirely to the trust. And the sole beneficiary is my son, Leo Finch." Meredith's hands flew to the document, her manicured nails ripping the first page. This is garbage. It's fake. You can't transfer assets without my consent. Read page 7, Vivian, I said, my voice dripping with ice. The trust contains a strict moral and safety clause, because if I die of any non-natural cause, or if my toxicology reports show even a microgram of heavy metal, the trust immediately locks. It freezes every single asset. It triggers an automatic federal investigation, and all my collected evidence, including Rhea Eldridge's toxicology report, is delivered directly to the Department of Justice. Dorian looked at Meredith, his arrogance completely shattered. His mouth opened. Vivian, the accounts, we're frozen? Everything we did, it's gone? We have nothing? Yes, Dorian, you're frozen, I said. You wanted my company? If I die tonight, you get nothing. If I live, you go to prison. Because the FBI is already executing a warrant on your Nevada shell accounts as we speak. Your bookie in Las Vegas won't be getting his money, Dorian, and neither will you. Meredith's face twisted in desperate rage. You old bastard! We still have the physical deeds. We can sell the Santa Monica land tomorrow. We can leave the country before the freeze clears. You can't sell a single square foot of land, Vivian, I replied, my voice steady as a concrete pillar. Because the trust deed was registered in Sacramento 3 days ago. You are holding worthless scrap paper. Meredith stared at the paper, her eyes bulging. Her hands began to shake violently. You think you can lock me up? I'll kill you myself. I'll throw you over that balcony. Try it, Vivian, I said, looking her dead in the eye. But remember, the camera in that smoke detector is streaming in 4K. If you touch me, the jury won't even need to deliberate. She grabbed a heavy bronze architectural model from the shelf. Her face twisted and raised it over her head. At the same time, Dorian's hand went to his pocket. He pulled out a heavy steel utility knife from the drafting desk, sliding the razor blade out with a dry, metallic click. If the trust locks, it locks, Dorian mouthed, his eyes dead as he raised the blade. But you won't be alive to see us burn, Lucian. I'll slide this blade right through your throat before the cops even cross the bridge. He lunged toward me, the silver blade flashing under the study lights. Meredith screamed, throwing herself forward with the bronze model, her eyes locked on my skull. Because my hearing was gone, the room was a silent movie of sheer violence. I raised my cane, bracing myself against the desk, preparing for the final bloody impact as the silver blade came slicing toward my throat. The silence was an absolute heavy weight. But because I had spent 30 years studying structural balance, I didn't need to hear Dorian's scream to know he was coming. I saw the shift of his weight, the white-knuckled grip on the utility knife, and the violent tilt of his shoulders. Because he was rushing me blindly, his center of gravity was completely off. I didn't back away. Instead, I braced my bad knee against the solid mahogany desk, waited for him to cross the threshold of my reach, and drove the steel tip of my cane directly into his injured foot. Dorian's face twisted into a silent, agonizing contortion. Because the pain buckled his leg, his lunge turned into a clumsy stumble. He went down hard, the razor blade slicing empty air before his chin slammed against the edge of the glass drafting table. But because Meredith was driven by pure desperation, she was already behind him. She swung the heavy bronze architectural model down toward my temple. Because I had anticipated her panic, I pivoted to the left, letting the bronze model slice through the space where my skull had been a second ago. The momentum carried her forward, and because the floor was still slick with the spilled pomegranate juice, her designer heels lost all traction. She went flying sideways, crashing violently against the tempered glass balustrade of the balcony. The glass didn't shatter, but because the impact was so severe, a long spiderweb crack blossomed outward, reflecting the cold blue twilight. Meredith lay on the floor, gasping, her fingers clawing at the slick wood as she stared up at me in absolute terror. Suddenly, a blinding flash of white light illuminated the hallway outside. Even without my hearing, the shockwave of the blast vibrated through the soles of my shoes. The heavy oak study door didn't just open, it splinters inward, blown off its hinges by a tactical breach. Dark figures in tactical gear, sporting the yellow letters of the FBI across their chests, poured into the room like a midnight tide. I didn't move. I simply raised my hands, keeping my cane pointed at the floor. Special Agent Rachel Torres stepped through the smoke, her service weapon raised, her lips moving in rapid, authoritative commands that I could easily read. "Federal agents! Nobody move! Hands where I can see them!" Two special agents threw themselves onto Dorian, pinning his arms behind his back and pulling the utility knife from his grip. Another agent had Meredith pinned near the cracked balcony glass, her hands secured in heavy plastic zip ties. I walked calmly over to my desk. Because I always kept a contingency plan for my equipment, I opened the bottom drawer, reached past the blueprints, and pulled out my spare cochlear processor. I slipped the coil onto my skull and clicked the switch. Click. The world exploded back into existence. The deafening howl of federal sirens from the Pacific Coast Highway, the rhythmic thump of a helicopter overhead, and the raw, guttural screaming of my wife shattered the silence. "You can't do this!" Meredith shrieked, her voice rising to a frantic, ugly pitch as she struggled against the agent's grip. "This is my house. My husband is senile. He's delusional. He's been hallucinating for months. Lucian, tell them. Tell them you're confused. Save your breath, Vivian," Agent Torres said, stepping over the shattered glass of my first processor. She held up a rugged federal tablet, showing a live-streamed video of Meredith pouring the thallium-laced juice while Dorian held me down. "Because we've been watching the whole show in real time from our mobile command unit. We have your entire conversation from the last 45 minutes logged, time-stamped, and uploaded to a secure federal server." "It's a setup," Dorian roared from the floor, his cheek pressed hard against the rug. "He's throwing a tantrum because we wanted to restructure the company. That microphone is illegal wiretapping. It won't hold up in a California court." "It's a federal warrant, Mr. Croft," Agent Torres replied, her voice cool as ice. "Because your little thallium procurement crossed state lines from Nevada, this is a multi-jurisdictional murder-for-hire investigation. And because the victim is a prominent federal contractor, the FBI has full jurisdiction. The wiretap was personally signed by a federal judge 3 days ago." "Lucian, please," Meredith sobbed, her face smeared with sweat and spilled juice as she looked at me. "I was trying to help you. The juice, it was just a supplement. I love you, Lucian. You know I've taken care of you. You didn't take care of me, Vivienne," I said, speaking clearly, my voice ringing out over the sound of the wind. "Because you were too busy taking care of my estate. I checked the Nevada registry. I saw the death certificates of James Harrison and Marcus Vance. They died of the exact same accidental falls after signing their assets over to you. Because you got away with it twice, you thought a deaf old man in Malibu would be an easy third." Meredith's face drained of all color. The sweet, loving facade she had worn for 10 years vanished, leaving only the hollow, desperate look of a trapped predator. You knew. "I knew the moment I got back from Switzerland," I said, "because a good architect never trusts a structure that shifts in the wind. I note the taste of the tea 6 months ago. I just needed the proof." "Dorian!" Meredith screamed, turning her eyes to the CFO. "He's lying! We didn't do anything. Tell them it was all your idea. You bought the chemicals. Shut up, Vivian!" Dorian snarled, his face twisted in rage as the agents dragged him to his feet. "She's the one who wanted him dead, Agent. She's the one who gave him the doses. I only handled the corporate filings. I'll cooperate. I'll tell you everything about her Nevada accounts." "You'll both have plenty of time to talk to the federal prosecutor," Agent Torres said, gesturing to her team. "Get them out of here." Because they were escorted out in handcuffs, their frantic shouting faded down the hallway, replaced by the clean, empty sound of the ocean surf. The glass door behind me opened fully, and a young man in a Stanford jacket rushed into the room. "Dad," Leo cried out, his face pale with worry as he threw his arms around my shoulders. "Oh my God, Dad, are you okay?" "Rhea called me." She told me what they were doing. "I'm okay, Leo," I whispered, holding my son tight, feeling the solid, real warmth of the only family I had left. "Because of the trust, we're safe. The company is yours now. They can't touch a single brick of our legacy." "I was so scared, Dad," Leo murmured, wiping his eyes as he looked at the shattered glass on the floor. I thought I was going to lose you too." "You won't lose me, son," I said, patting his shoulder with a firm, steady hand. "Because we built this family on a foundation of steel. It takes more than a couple of vultures to tear down a finch." I walked out onto the balcony, leaning against the cracked glass rail, looking out at the vast, dark expanse of the Pacific. The cold wind bit at my face, but because my head was completely clear of their poison, every breath felt like a victory. They thought my silence was my weakness, because they were blinded by their own greed. They never realized that the quietest rooms are the ones where you can hear the structural cracks loudest. I let them build their trap, only to use their own weight to bury them. True strength isn't about shouting or fighting back with fists. It's about patience. It's about laying the legal and financial blueprints so perfectly that the enemy has no choice but to walk straight into their own cage. Thank you all for standing by me through this dark, treacherous journey of a father's survival. If you want to see how we completely rebuild Finch architecture from the ashes and ensure these monsters never see the light of day again, make sure to hit that subscribe button, drop a like on this video, and share your thoughts in the comments below on how you would have handled this betrayal.